everyone, and welcome to our YouTube channel, Moneyline with Nancy at TV. In case you're not a subscriber yet, please do subscribe. Just press the subscribe button as well as turn on the notification bell so that you can get notifications when we upload our videos. Don't also forget to subscribe and join, follow, like our other social media platforms. Of course, you're seeing it right about now. Don't also forget to share this video across your platforms. Enjoy the video. Hello everyone, good morning and welcome to the program. This is Moneyline with Nancy. I am Nancy Nnaji. It's just a few hours ago that the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu declared a state of emergency in our Rivers State. Today on the program, we'll be looking at the political economy implications, the governance implications. Of course, we know that two pipelines exploded in the last 24 hours. What are the economic implications of what we're seeing in Rivers State? What are the implications on states' autonomy, as it were, fiscal federalism, and some other things that we'll look at? Of course, there's the political crisis, but this morning we will be taking a look at another dimension of it. Is it a competition for Rivers State resources that we're seeing by the powers that be? How is the state, talking about the federal government, in handling it without looking at the different tiers of government in the state? So my guests will be joining me shortly, and they will be analyzing that. I have Joachim Macebong, who is a government expert, a governance expert, I must say, and a governance analyst. He'll be joining me shortly to take a look at that. And a development economist, Victor Alikor. We will try as much as possible to dissect the political economy of this. In all of this, what do the Rivers people stand to gain? Don't forget that sometimes in February, the Supreme Court ordered, in fact, the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Accountant General of the Federation not to give monies to Rivers State, of course, bearing in mind the judgment and all of that. With what the president did yesterday, will the monies now be allocated to the sole administrator that President Tinubu has appointed? These and other issues we will be looking at on the program. But first of all, let's take excerpts from the president's speech on the state of emergency in Rivers State last night.
The latest security report made available to me show that between yesterday and today, there have been disturbing incidents of vandalization of pipelines by some militants without governor taking any action to curtail them. I have, of course, given stand order to the security agencies to ensure safety of lives of good people of Rivers State and the oil pipelines. With all this and many more, no good and responsible president will stand by and allow the grave situation to continue without taking remedial steps prescribed by the Constitution to address the situation in the state, which no doubt requires extraordinary measures to restore good governance, peace, order, and security. In these circumstances, having soberly reflected on and evaluated the political situation in Rivers State, and the governor and deputy governor of Rivers State, having failed to make a request to me as president to issue this proclamation as required by Section 305, Paragraph 5 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, it has become inevitably compelling for me to invoke the provision of the Section 305 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State with effect from today, 18th March, year 2025, and I so do. By this declaration, the governor of Rivers State, Mr. Siminalayi Fubara, his deputy, Mrs. Ngozi Odu, and all elected members of the House of Assembly State are hereby suspended for an initial period of 6 months. In the meantime, I hereby nominate Vice Admiral Eboket Ibas, retired, as administrator to take charge of the affairs of the state in the interest of the good people of Rivers State.
Let's get right into it. The emergency rule in Rivers State. Joining me right now are my guests, two gentlemen. The first is in the studio is a development economist, Victor Alikor. Welcome to the program,
Thank
Victor.
you very much for having me, Nancy.
Joachim Macebong is a governance analyst. He's joining me virtually from Lagos, the commercial nerve center of the country. Welcome to the program, Joachim, and good to have you too.
Good morning, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Now let's get started. Victor, what is your reading of what has happened in the last few hours? Let's just take it from there because we know there's a historical context to all of this. Perhaps the breakdown in communication and I also call it perhaps a fight for Rivers State resources. That is the underbelly in the midst of all of this, not just having political power derived from economic control, economic resources control. So what is your reading of all of this?
Yeah, Nancy, so it's a sad, very sad situation. Beyond myself being a Nigerian, I hail from Rivers State, sadly. I'm sure every citizen of Rivers State will be quite ashamed with the political play in Rivers State. But if we take a look at the economic side of what has happened, if you look at for Rivers State, the 2025 contentious budget was 1.1 trillion. If you look at Rivers State, it has the second highest GDP in Nigeria, behind Lagos. If you also look at the population of the state, we have over 8 million people in Rivers State. If you also look at the resource contribution, you agree with me that Rivers State, beyond Lagos, is also Nigeria's highest. But sadly, if you also look at what the statistics from MBS is saying, that Rivers State has the third highest unemployment rate in Nigeria after Abia State and FCT. It only shows you that the political squabble, not just in the last few months or in the last few hours, but sadly, again, statistics is also saying that in the last 10 years, the state have attracted little or nothing in terms of foreign direct investment into the state. It shows you that the crisis in Rivers State doesn't favor the common man. It doesn't favor public servants. I, for one, have my parents who both retired in Rivers State since 2020. They have not been paid their gratuity till date. Sadly, all of this is snowballing into what a lot of us cannot comprehend. But it's sad because what has happened last night clearly shows that it's an interest of two individuals over the interest of 8 million people in the state. But another thing I want to bring to bear is that I'm not so much interested in the political happenings because I feel I do not have perhaps sufficient information well enough to have an opinion on that issue. But from the economic standpoint, we can speak of it. But it's also sad again that Rivers State, which is, we know the contribution of the state to the center, is going through this battle. Mr. Presidents have had to intervene politically. There have been judicial attestation or perhaps statement on issues around the state, but we have not seen so much achievement in the last two years. Governors have suffered badly, but again, I foresee that in the next 6 months, it might even get worse.
Okay, Joachim, let me come to you and take your own initial reading of the situation, the current situation in Rivers State as we speak.
Thank you, Nancy. I think that with regards to the action of the president yesterday, I need to be very clear that it is first and foremost, it is unconstitutional. The section that he quoted, section 305, does not give the president any powers to suspend the governor, deputy governor, or the State House of Assembly. It does give the president the power to declare a state of emergency even without the governor, basically requesting the president to do so. But regarding the actual suspension, it gives the president no such powers. And so what we have actually now is a constitutional crisis. And that crisis, there is still time for that crisis to be resolved in the interest of the constitution and the interest of the Nigerian people. Now, there are still ways by which that can be resolved. It can be resolved by the Senate, either tomorrow or next, when the vote for ratifying the state of emergency comes up. Now, in order for that to be ratified, there is a need for 2/3 of both the Senate and the House of Reps to, to basically assent to that declaration. And then the courts can also do what they need to do with regards to reaffirming previous judgments and also reaffirming the position of the Constitution on whether the president has the powers to suspend the government. Now, those are the two remaining checks and balances that we have in place. Hopefully, one or both of those checks are going to hold up, because as far as the action of that suspension is concerned, it is unconstitutional, and I think that we should make that very clear for those who are going to be watching this program.
Joachim, let me stick with you and let's talk about governance a bit regarding how the 6 months time frame we're seeing right now in Rivers State, as announced by Mr. President yesterday, how the temporary federal control of Rivers State affects the distribution of allocations to the state, bearing in mind, which I mentioned earlier on, that the Supreme Court had ordered they ordered the CBN and the Accountant General of the Federation in February, just a few weeks ago, not to release funds to Rivers State. So with this announcement by Mr. President yesterday, what would change? Would they release those funds down to the retired Vice Admiral Ibas for, the utilization in the states? That, which is not also, is that democratic? Speaking from a governance point of view, that actually is a very sticky area for me.
Thank you, Nancy, for that fantastic question. The Constitution's framers did not envisage a situation whereby a governor will be suspended and as such will not now be able to ensure the utilization of resources for the benefit of the state. Now that the governor has been suspended, and the deputy governor and the State House of Assembly, the mechanism for that utilization of resources for the benefit of the state is now no longer present. To give that money to an unelected sole administrator for a period of 6 months is doubly unconstitutional, because again, there's no provision in the Constitution anywhere for that to happen. Now, if you give him the money, what do you want him to do with it? Are you going to, on what basis will he be disbursing the money? Will he be disbursing the money on the template of a budget that has not yet been resolved because of the issues in the state? Will he be disbursing the money on the basis? So on what basis will he be utilizing those funds? And in whose name will he be utilizing those funds? Like you said, these are questions that have to be answered, and they have to be answered quickly, because with every day that passes, the people of Rivers State do not have the resources necessary, from the government to carry out their day-to-day lives, and will not be able to feel the governance, the presence of government in their day-to-day lives. Victor has already spoken about the high unemployment in the state, and so on. And those are the resources that will be deployed in order to ensure that these issues are alleviated. And now, I just wonder to what aims. And I, wonder, where we go from here precisely.
Okay, Victor, let me come to you. You mentioned something earlier on. Your parents are retirees and they haven't been paid their gratuities since 2020. What was the reason for that? Or actually, what's the reason for that? Because it's still ongoing.
Well, again, the political excuse you hear is that there are backlogs of gratuities to be paid, and perhaps they're offsetting those backlogs. But again, if we also stick to what my friend Joachim said, clearly the action of Mr. President yesterday was unconstitutional. What we saw was perhaps an offshoot of what have happened previously, where the Obasanjo's administration had done same in Plateau State. He had also done same in Ekiti State, where he also suspended the both governors. But we also had the administration of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, who also declared state of emergencies in 3 states, Yobe, Adamawa, and Borno, without suspending the governors, actually. So we're having a repeat of backlog where it is throwing us into constitutional crisis. MBA and several other civil societies have come out clearly to say that the action of Mr. President is grossly unconstitutional. And I agree with that. But again, why I worry so much for Rivers is because, remember, according to the Supreme Court ruling, there are no 23 local government chairmen as we speak. Again, according to the Supreme Court ruling and Mr. President's decision, now the houses of assembly members, 31 of them, whether those in opposition or those in support, are also off. The governor has been unconstitutionally suspended again for 6 months or more. And the question most of us will ask, like you also rightly asked Joachim, what happens to the budget of the state? It means the sole administrator will be left with working with internally generated revenue in the state. And remember, as at Monday, civil servants in Rivers State had already been preparing themselves for strike, as they suspect that their salaries or other emoluments could be grounded because of decision of the Supreme Court and the governor's inability to have represented the budget as instructed by the Supreme Court. Now, these are part of the issues we're looking at. Commissioners, again, are off, again, as a result of this suspension. It means the sole administrator will have to perhaps work with the HPMs at the local government, perhaps we'll have to work with permanent secretaries for the ministries, and I worry he might be overwhelmed. I worry that, again, he's a native of Cross River State, not originally from River State. Perhaps may not be familiar with the governance terrain in the state. These are part of the issues. But I'm also worried around the gross or high level of unemployment rate. I spent a considerable number of my adult life and even childhood in River State. And I can tell you for free that if you have seen when young people are coming out on Monday mornings, I mean active work day, protesting either in support or in favor of a particular political faction, it shows you the high level of unemployment rate in the state. I worry that in the next 6 months, it will get worse. Governance will suffer. A lot of the projects, perhaps that the current governor of the state, Sim Fowara, has been commissioning, it means they would now be grounded. There are no guarantees that the sole administrator will continue from those projects. There are also no guarantees because, of course, he doesn't have access to federal coffers because of Supreme Court ruling, that expenditures or governance issues will improve in the state. But it's sad, and for me, I'm worried that my lovely state, River State, is going through this crisis because of the so selfish interest of two individuals who are perhaps formerly from the same political family.
You know, you've raised critical issues, and let's take a look at that. You brought in historical context in the sense, in the persons of President Obasanjo, as well as former President Obasanjo and former President Jonathan. Let's take a few questions from there. In terms of the past, what lessons could we learn from the state of emergencies declared in those states and their impact on the local economies? That's one. Number two is the impact on state autonomy, because we operate a federalism as it is, whether it's lip service or whatever, but we have 3 tiers of government. How would it impact the autonomy that we're seeing, that we hope to see, or what do we hope to see in terms of autonomy in the next 6 months? That's one. Number 3 is ongoing project and perhaps even government services. How will existing state policies and programs be managed, as it were? You also brought up an interesting perspective to it. Commissioners are no longer there. Perhaps they'll be operating with permanent secretaries and all of that. We saw a president in this country operate with those for about 6 months or 9 months before he appointed his ministers. Though we're having, you know, so much bad precedents. If we're having things done badly all the time, here in Nigeria now, it now seems that the bad decision becomes good, and we're all you know, we don't talk about it. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, so anybody that advised Mr. President yesterday, I'm not sure they advised him correctly. Because I also think that why the National Assembly will have to legislate on the issue between today or tomorrow, or within 10 days, as stipulated by the Constitution. You agree with me that this is the first time in the history of Nigeria, I mean, the first time in the history of Nigeria where Mr. President was a former senator, the Vice President was a former senator, the SGF of the Federation is a former senator, the Chief of Staff is a former House of Rep Speaker, Mr. President's wife is a former senator. They have a strong grip on the National Assembly. So I foresee that the National Assembly will buy in with Mr. President's opinion that the state of emergency go ahead in River State. But the sad part is, if you look at historical trajectory, in those states where it has happened, if you look at when it happened in Plateau State because of religious crisis, did it help? Certainly did not. Which the current president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, criticized clearly. We have seen the newspapers come out to say he criticized it clearly when it was done in the past. But it's sad that several years after, now he's the commander-in-chief. he was ill-advised to go ahead with that move. Governance, again, in the state would suffer grossly. Why would it suffer? Because the necessary architectures, there are reasons why we have commissioners, there are reasons why we have local government chairmen. And if these individuals are not there, again, they don't have the funding backup from the federal coffers to support the sole administrator for either minimum of 6 months or more. Again, it's also a contentious issue. And again, how would the average Rivers people perceive the issues of state of emergency? Are we sure we won't have suspected case of sabotage on the national asset? Again, not just beyond Rivers again, to other pockets or neighboring states within Rivers. Remember the Ijaw connection with other neighboring states. So I'm not sure Mr. President was rightly advised, but I think he still has time, either through himself or through the National Assembly, to alter or to rescind the decision to declare a state of emergency. The only reason I perceive would have warranted such decision from Mr. President was when it was alleged that 2 oil pipelines were blown up yesterday, and perhaps AIT and some other stations reported that there could be potential case of sabotage on the national asset. And perhaps Mr. President was more conscious protecting Nigeria's national assets than perhaps the political crisis in Rivers State. Again, remember that last month and 2 months ago, Nigeria has failed to meet its OPEC quota. It then means revenue to the national coffers is plummeting, and perhaps Mr. President don't want a repeat of such. But I worry that unemployment rate, poverty, there could be governance crisis in Rivers State.
Okay, we'll come back to that in terms of perhaps the oil pipeline explosions we've seen and the impact on Nigeria's revenue going forward, bearing in mind that I think we have about 12 million of our 12 cargoes of unsold crude right now, and with all the shenanigans happening. Joachim, let me come back to you. How do you think that, and I'm careful to say this because President Tinubu has said, of course, that the administrator will work with the Federal Executive Council, which the last thing I know, at least with the information that I have now, the Federal Executive Council is not empowered to do that. So the administrator will be working with Federal Executive Council with President Tinubu on that. Of course, he's the head of the Federal Executive Council. How will the federal government's control, now we are seeing a federal government's control of states' finances during this period, how does it pose to centralization concerns? You know, because President Tinubu was not, he wasn't too explicit in that speech yesterday as to this, because there are huge governance concerns around this.
Thank you, Nancy. So what happens when you begin an action on the grounds of illegality is that in order to proceed, you unfortunately have to mount illegality on top of illegality. The Federal Executive Council has they have no expertise about how Rivers State functions. They have no expertise about the nuances of the states, and they have no expertise about what the state needs in order to move forward. The person on the Federal Executive Council who may claim to have such expertise is Nyesom Wike. So what he means when he says that he actually means Nyesom Wike. He doesn't mean the Federal the FEC, because they don't have any expertise between them. Now, what then happens is that, like you said, you then bring up the issues of centralization. And I think I need to make something very clear. The previous times when when Obasanjo suspended Dariye, and did other action in the state, both times it was deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. I mean, so there's that. And also, like has already been said a few minutes ago, when there was state of emergency called in the Northeast, those governors were not also suspended for the simple reason that there are no powers to do so. And also, if you are going to step into a security situation and aid the governors on the ground and aid the civilian authorities on the ground, you need that local expertise in order to make sure that the intervention, has the best possible outcome. Now, that is now completely absent in this case. What you are doing, what you've done in Rivers State is that you basically handed it over to one man, which is Nyesom Wike, because again, the retired retired admiral does not have expertise in Rivers State. The FEC does not have expertise in Rivers State. The person who does is Wike. So you basically handed the state back over to Wike in what is essentially a third term. That's what's happening here.
That
Wike has a third term in Rivers State, in
that
essence. That's what is happening here.
that's a very strong analysis that you're giving, that perhaps President Tinubu bought the side of Minister Wike in administering those decisions that he took yesterday. But like I mentioned, even at the beginning of the program, and even some days ago, on Monday, when I started the live shows again, after about 2 weeks of live broadcast that we've seen on this station, like I always say, nothing concerns me with a political shenanigan, who does what, whether it's for Fubara or for Wike. I'm not for any one of them. But the issue is that governance has to be done right, and the president also needs to act rightly. Now, let me come to Victor. Let's take a look at perhaps the Trans-Niger pipeline alone that transports about 450,000 barrels of crude per day, what this means for Nigeria's daily oil exports. Bearing in mind our 2025 budget, we have a price of, I think, about $75 US. The president's 2025 budget too was also ambitious in terms of oil production. With what we've seen now with those two explosions within the last 24 hours or so, what kind of setbacks do you think that it would, what are the implications of this setback? That's one. Then can Nigeria really afford any more production disruptions when our crude oil output is already falling below expectations? I was going through the OPEC report for our country, and we're clearly not meeting expectations as it is. So do you also think that perhaps the president is also right in terms of declaring the state of emergency, because he is looking at his pockets? You said it very factually at the beginning. Rivers State is important in terms of oil production and the petrodollars that we're making.
Yeah, so Nancy, it's very sad, because I think a nation that is almost 65 years should be going beyond the conversation of having a particular mono economy where we still have one major resources as national revenue for our coffers. And I think if you look at Mr. President's approach since he came on board in about 2 years, he has been shifting attention towards taxation as an alternative source of raising revenue for Nigeria. But I'm sure that, like you said, the national budget is ambitious, 2 million barrels of crude per day. We have even fallen short of OPEC's
targets.
Quota. It then means Mr. President, of course, is concerned, because Nigeria has a lot of debt obligations we need to offset, and we also need to meet our internal development needs. But my worry again is that he could snowball his approach yesterday, or the announcement could possibly snowball into even further crisis or exacerbate the issue. Having a sole administrator managing the state, because I'm sure if you take a street poll, majority of Rivers citizens are disgruntled with the decision, because we also feel that perhaps there are some other states that have gone into worse crisis than even Rivers in terms of political crisis or political disorder or public disruption of peace that should have perhaps had the declaration of state of emergency, but they haven't. But again, if you look at the economic impact to Nigeria, it's huge, it's humongous. Our major source of revenue is from crude oil, even if we know that the non-oil sector have been performing fairly well. But I'm sure Mr. President is also worried, because we have our debt obligations. We need to also have the country running. But again, it's also sad that he took the fact that those two pipelines were blown up before Mr. President had national security advisor, and then they declared a state of emergency. Is that enough justification to have warranted a state of emergency? I don't think so. Again, remember, Nancy, that the Commissioner of Police is not directly responsible to the governor of the state. It also means that the commandant of barracks in Rivers State is also not answerable to the state governor.
Because the president alluded to it somehow in his speech yesterday, to say that the explosions that we saw in Rivers State, that the governor did not
yes.
take control as it were.
But how would the governor, let's be honest, particularly when there's political crisis, how would the governor have a grip to give the commissioner of police or even the military commanders instructions, or even the Navy commanders instructions on how to manage the pipeline? That was beyond his powers to do as a governor. But I also think that vast majority of River citizens, what we need is peace. We need progress in the state. Again, remember that during the administration of former Governor Nyeso Wike, he was not in the same party with President Buhari
Okay.
when he was in power.
Yeah.
So the state suffered 8 years of neglect from federal attention or projects. Again, we're also seeing a repeat of such in the last 2 years. Again, remember, like I said, foreign direct investment is either zero or nothing to Rivers in the last 10 years. So these are issues that is impacting local governance in the states and also revenue to the country by and large. Because if you look at the cosmopolitan cities beyond Lagos, Rivers will come second. It means if high unemployment rate in Rivers State, it means people are not able to pay taxes enough, whether CIT, whether PIT, or name it. It also means that if the poverty numbers are high, it's also impacting the national coffers. If oil pipelines are blown up because of perhaps the Ijaw connection with other neighboring states where they have crude oil, it means it will also impact our national revenue as a country. But I think Nigeria should have gone past this conversation of having a particular source of revenue deciding the fate of the country.
Macebong, let me come back to you and let's take a look at how this emergency rule might reshape the relationship between federal and state governments in Nigeria, since we already have historical context. And like I said, the history that we have currently from Plateau, Ekiti, and other emergency rules in other states, though they differ. President Jonathan did not suspend the governors of those 3 states. When he did that, it was specific for a purpose. Now, how will this reshape the relationship between federal and state governments? That's number one. Number 2 question is around, I still come back to the question of around accountability of state spending. It's one to say that perhaps the CBN now and an accountant general will be releasing funds to Rivers State now. The accountability of these funds, how do we ensure that these funds are well utilized? Because with what has happened now, the sole administrator would not be giving 0 naira not to run the place. Apparently, he may be giving some money. So how do we ensure? Sorry?
IGR,
yes.
Perhaps.
You know, so how do we ensure accountability? Because the state legislators, let me put this in, the state legislator, that's the legislative arm in that state, is supposed to ensure accountability of those spending. Now with suspended legislature, what happens? So everything is decided in Abuja.
Thank you, Nancy. So let me begin with the first question. By the time I answer the second question, I don't think you or the viewers may like the answer to my second question. But let me answer the first question. So I think that as far as this is concerned, as I said earlier, there is still some time to roll it back. There is time for the Senate and for the Supreme Court to act. There is still time for them to make the necessary statements and do the necessary decisions to ensure that this particular action of suspension does not hold. Because if it does hold, what it does is that it is going to form a precedent that any other president tomorrow, can decide to take up in a state where he is interested in. So, for example, a future president who is in a different party from the party of the governor in Lagos State, for example, may just decide to say that, because of this and that issues with maybe the NURTW in Lagos State, for example, maybe if maybe one of their leadership persons gets a little bit on the violent side, or you have something around local government elections getting rather violent, then said president can declare a state of emergency, and suspend the governor, and then begin to try to get his hands on the resources of Lagos State. So that is a potential future scenario that may not manifest tomorrow. It may not manifest in 5 years. It could be in 10, it could be in 15. But that precedent is there. And so we still have time to prevent that precedent, from taking hold. And I do hope, even though my hope is a little bit slim, I do hope that there is that the remaining guardrails that we have in the country, to the extent that we still have them, of course, can hold in this particular situation. Now, for your second question, my answer will be less palatable, unfortunately. You have the governor, you have the deputy governor, you have the House of Assembly. You would have, of course, the budget, a past budget that will be basis on which spending decisions are taken in the states. And then, of course, you would have elected local government chairmen in moving government ruling last by the Supreme Court, who would also be empowered legally to basically to disburse these funds for the benefits of the people in those local governments. Now, with all of these individuals suspended, with no budget in place, with no signed budget in place, with no passed budget in place, and with no local government, elected local government chairman, what you have is you have the money, whatever money is going to be disbursed, or whatever money is going to be given to the sole administrator, that money will be passed directly to Nyesom Wike. That is what is going to happen. Because all of
Joachim,
the
you may not be sure of that now. Minister Wike is not the governor of. Is not the governor of Rivers State.
All of the established means, all of the established.
Is it Nyesom Wike that will be paying the PAMSECs and the civil servants?
There is no budget on. No past budget. There's no past budget.
Okay.
There's no past budget. There's no governor, no deputy governor, no state house of assembly. There are none of these people whom we can hold accountable for this spending decision. There is only retired Admiral Ibas, and now there's Nyesom Wike. Those are the people who will have those funds to do it as they please.
Okay, Joachim, I'll come back to you. But before I come back to you, I want you to also chew on this, because we also have historical perspective as to when this started happening. The love that has gone bad between Nyesom Wike and Fubara. We know that, of course, Fubara presented his budget, I think, to a three-man legislature and all of that. That was not also okay. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? So we will look at all of this.
It's not okay, but that was it's not okay, but that is a direct, but that's a direct outcome of the fact that Nyesom Wike has refused to leave governance for the governor to do.
Okay,
that is the direct consequence.
Okay,
it's a direct consequence. You cannot divorce that from his action.
Okay, Joachim, so much, because this is just all about political economy. There's no how we'll talk about the economics of it without putting in the politics. But we have our reporter, Akahan Sirim, standing by for us right now in Port Harcourt. Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
You very well.
Can you hear me? Can you talk to...
Hello, Nancy.
Yes. Good morning.
Yes, Nancy.
Yes. Good morning, Nsirim. Speak to me about what's happening. Gauge for me the pulse of the people of Rivers State, especially in Port Harcourt, where you are. How are they taking this news, and are economic activities on? Because I understand that there's a huge military presence, especially around the government house. Are people trepidated and afraid to come out for their businesses today?
Okay, right now, Nancy, I am at GRA Junction. What we have here in this part of Port Harcourt is similar to what we have in Wall Street, New York, where we have several banks and other commercial establishments in place. As I speak to you, normal business and commercial activities are going on in the city of Port Harcourt. Nobody is being harassed by anything. You know, when they announced the takeover of Admiral Abok Ete-Ibas, a lot of persons were mistaking it to be a situation where the streets of Port Harcourt, will be militarized by this morning. But I can tell you for free that nothing of such is happening. Every other person is going about their businesses. The military presence you talked about can only be seen somewhere around the government house axis. But apart from that, I can tell you that everybody in Port Harcourt, the whole place is calm. Not even a single protest, apart from the one we experienced from, we actually saw two guys who were protesting in front of Government House, where we actually got there for our first report. But aside that, I can tell you everybody is going about their lawful businesses unhindered and uninterrupted.
How are the locals feeling in Sirim? How are the locals?
Hello, Nancy.
Yes, how are the locals? How are the locals feeling? What are their sentiments this morning?
Okay, sincerely, I can tell you that with the conversations we've had with some people we saw on the streets, their streets are actually, their spirits are actually dampened, no doubt, because this is exactly what people did not expect, and it has happened. Especially party supporters, a lot of them are in a very sad state, you understand? But we believe that in the next couple of days, when this same kind of peace that we're experiencing now continues, it shows that everybody can actually go about without anybody being arrested or intimidated by anybody. But as I speak to you, the calmness we're experiencing in the streets of Port Harcourt shows that a lot of people are actually sad about the development. But for now, nobody has been harassed or intimidated either by supporting the governor or being a supporter of the FCT minister. Everybody's just moving about the way they should.
Then, Onsirim, from where you're standing, what I can depict from where you're standing right now is that perhaps that road should be busier than it is right now. I can actually count the cars that are moving around, and like you said, that street could be likened to the Wall Street that you have in New York. Speak to me about it. Am I interpreting something different here in the studio? Because that should be a busier street, so to speak. I can count the number of cars there and even the people walking on the streets. Are people taking like a sit at home look kind
like
of thing? Do you understand? Let me see first. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Before I go come out.
Okay, ordinarily this place, like I said, is GRA Junction. But this axis of GRA, like I said, we have a lot of commercial establishments around here. Ordinarily, in any government reserved area, you don't expect movements to be the way they usually are on the regular routes and streets of Port Harcourt. And so I can tell you that, yes, it may seem like activities are not, or movements are not the way they used to be, but it doesn't translate to the fact that people did not come out or people are actually being under any kind of pressure as a result of the pronouncement of the president yesterday over the issue of state of emergency. Nobody has complained of any sort. We have listened to monitoring radio programs across the different media houses in Port Harcourt. I can tell you that the conversations are actually at that level. A lot of people are calling in, expressing their opinions about what has happened, but it has not translated to the fact that people are now scared of coming out of their houses. I don't think there's anything like that in any part of Port Harcourt so far.
Okay, finally, do you know about the whereabouts of the governor? Is he in government house? What exactly is happening as to that? And the deputy too.
Okay, well, from the information we had, the governor is still in government house. I can't tell the whereabouts of the deputy. Of course, this is because the Real Admiral that has been appointed to take over the affairs of Rivers State, I don't think they have handed over to him officially. And so I think once the governor has performed that particular activity, that particular function, I think he will exit the government house, in line with the presidential directive.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nsirim, for coming to us with the updates right now from Port Harcourt, Rivers State. Thank you very much. We'll definitely be getting updates from you within the bulletin when AIT reports comes up. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Nancy.
All right. Victor, what's your perspective around perhaps it's, in fact, I must also commend Nsirim. This is a business program. We had to go to, a business nerve center to do that, intervention for me. This speaks to like investor sentiment. This speaks to like foreign direct investment, which you talked about. This speaks also around economic diversification in Rivers State, because Rivers State is heavy on crude oil. So how do you interpret all of this? And I also need to bring in this perspective, which is the area of the locals, as it were. Who is thinking about the Rivers people, the average Rivers man and woman right now that is poor, that do not have a job, that perhaps depends on, because even government contracts right now are uncertain. People that have gotten contracts from government, perhaps from the SIM administration, they are uncertain right now because you don't know. And those people are also employ people. So it's a vicious, it's a circle, it's a web. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, there's a particular school of thought in political economy that will say those who control the economy controls politics and governance. And my submission to His Excellency Sim Fubara and His Excellency Nyeso Wike, if they are listening to this program, is I'm a Rivers son. They should sheldon their sword. What Rivers people want is peace. What we want to see is dividends of democracy or good governance in the state. Healthcare will suffer. Education will suffer. Their interest is just for a short or momentary period of time. It will outlive their legacies if we continue in this political crisis. Rivers has over 8 million people, and the interests of those 8 million people should supersede their personal interest, whether ahead of 2027 or 2031. Rivers State is a crucial state to Nigeria. My parents, our siblings, our families, our relatives, indigents, locals, residents of the state cannot continue to suffer from political stubbornness of two individuals. I think they should shelve their sword. There is still room for them to negotiate from both parties and resolve whatever the differences are. I am speaking as someone perhaps who's outside the fence, who may not have originally understood the core reason behind people who were political godfathers and political godson now parting ways and now bringing the state into this level of governance disrepute and shame. My advice to them is that they should shelve their sword and toe the path of peace. And I'm also encouraging residents.
Haven't we gone past that?
We have actually, but is that what is the reality on ground? I doubt.
Or can it still be salvaged?
I think it can be salvaged. I think so. We have the governor have spent roughly 2 years. There's still 2 years for him in his first tenure. Let's allow the will of the people to supersede their personal interest.
Now, what is the will of the people? Because they're also, the Rivers is now polarized around ethnic lines, around Sim Fubara supporters, Wike supporters. So what actually will be the will of the people?
Let me give you a small example.
Very quickly, in a few seconds, I have to go to Joachim.
Third state in Nigeria in terms of unemployment rate. There is no ICT hub. I stand to be, you can quote anybody. No ICT hub in River State, no skill acquisition center in River State. Employment rates, opportunities from the government are not transparent. We have gone past that stage. I think vast majority of Rivers people want to see investment in the state. They want access to job opportunities. They want to see investment that would improve their living standards. And that's what the will of the people is. And for civil servants, they want to see their salaries paid for retirees. They want to see their gratuities and pensions paid. So actually,
the Rivers people want better governance.
Simple.
That's it. Joachim, as I close, the president, of course, is Joachim still there? What do you expect from the National Assembly? Joachim, yes. What do you expect from the National Assembly?
I'm here.
Yes, go ahead.
So I hope the National Assembly will decide to override the suspension of the governor.
Do you think it could happen since the NAS leadership was consulted? I think they had a security meeting before the president went on that broadcast. And the National Assembly that has been touted as a rubber stamp National Assembly, yes, even though they vehemently oppose that, do you think they could surprise Nigerians?
There is still some time for them to surprise Nigerians because you need a 2/3 of all 469 members. So what does that mean? You need about 300 and something people to say that they are in support of the decision, not just to declare a state of emergency, but also to suspend the governor and the deputy governor and the State House of Assembly. Now, those are two things. They can decide to agree on one and disagree on the other one. So I think that there is still some time and there's still an opportunity for them to surprise Nigerians. However, I think one last thing I wanted to say here is that you cannot talk about foreign investment, attracting foreign investment and so on into the oil sector and other sectors of the economy and have this kind of serious political crisis in one of your main economic nerve centers, not up to 2 years after taking office. You are saying one thing, but you are doing something else. And there is nothing that turns away foreign direct investment more than uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
It now means that tomorrow there can be another issue in another state and then something similar happens. You cannot do business like that. You cannot have long-term investments like that. Now, that is what I hope that all the actors in this particular, as one former senator says, macabre dance, should hold in their heads today,
Okay.
because you cannot have those two things cannot possibly coexist, unfortunately.
I think we have to leave it at that. We've said so much this morning, at least coming from a different angle, because so much has been said even in the media space around the political crisis, the political point of view. But for us this morning on the program, we try to look at the economic implications of the state of emergency, the federal and state relations, the ease of doing business in the state, the impact on the locals, the impact on the communities, as to even the explosions that happened in the last I think 24 hours or so. Yep. So many issues when it comes to economy and governance impact. Investors' confidence, I must say. Joachim, you are really spot on there in terms of what has happened now. What kind of signal are you even sending to local investors, let alone international investors? But thank you both, gentlemen, for coming. Victor Alikor, thank you very much. Development economist, as well as Joachim Macebong, a governance analyst, joining us from Lagos, speaking on the state of emergency in Rivers. All right, just before I go, let me also tell you that our March Business Clinic will be coming up on the 28th of March, God willing. We'll be talking about how to build wealth from the scratch. Dr. Stephen Akitayo will be joining me. You know the drill. In case you don't know it, just send a message. I'm interested on that WhatsApp number that has been on the screen. Okay, that's it for you on the screen. Send I'm interested, and my team will take it from there so that you can have, a membership into our virtual room to ask your questions as to how to build your wealth from ground up with me and Dr. Stephen Akitayo on March 28th. That's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Let peace reign. Let there be peace in Rivers State. I am Nancy Naji. Be the best you can be and be the change you want to see. Thank you for making it up to this minute watching the video. Thank you all. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Moneyline with Nancy TV. Follow all our other social media platforms where we keep you up to speed with fantastic interviews, as well as markets, personal finance, business, and economy information. This is the best place to be. I'll see you all again in the next video.